Welcome to the Dangerous Man Podcast, where we talk about how to become a better man, take responsibility for our mission, create value for others, and the many failures and lessons we've learned along the way. Stay dangerous. What is up, guys? This is your host, John Kostohris, and you're joined by your co-host,
Adam Thooft. What's up, guys?
What is up? You are listening to the Dangerous Man Podcast. Well, it's the day after Christmas, December 26th.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry fucking Christmas, gents. Today, what's up, Adam? I haven't seen you in a minute. How you doing?
It's been a second. I'm actually a little tired right now, but we're podcasting and I'm hyped to do it.
Dude, yeah. It's the kind of thing like we get chatting and we just start getting fired up. So it's only a matter of time before,
That's why we started this in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. So I have been doing some reading. This is kind of the background of today's topic is I've been doing some reading. I've been reading a great author by the name of Russell Brunson. He's an entrepreneur. He started the company ClickFunnels, which is an awesome platform, kind of website type sales funnel platform for selling products and offers and services and getting leads. It's awesome. And I love his writing. He's got a great 3-book series, which I'm not getting paid to promote, but I just think it's great. But I've been reading Expert Secrets and his first book, .com Secrets. He is a big proponent of teaching frameworks and kind of one of the frameworks, essentially like an outline or if you will, for different topics or concepts that he likes to learn and synthesize and be able to teach to people. And one of them that we're going to be covering today is within a topic of story-based communication. I thought this would be a great topic to chat about just because like personally, I am really, really sold on the concept of if you communicate using stories, you just capture people's attention and you hold their attention, you keep it. And Absolutely. Attention is such a commodity in today's world where it's like, you can almost say attention is the new oil, where it's hard to get. And if you have people's attention, you can have their money, you can have their opinions. It's really powerful. And essentially, when it comes to story-based communication, the reason I say I'm so sold on this is because if you communicate using a story, people understand. Like they get hooked on a story. They're like, oh, you didn't see me, but because this is audio, but I just turned my head and like poked my ear up and I'm like, ooh, like I'm kind of curious. I want to hear how this goes. You really suck people in with a good story, and a good storyteller is charismatic, and they're able to communicate a message or some kind of like a value. This is the reason like children's books, like what would you call like those books of tales,
fairy tales.
Oh yeah, be like, let's take all these concepts we want to teach children and put them into stories. And that just goes to show that stories are powerful. And it's no like surprise that we'd be using stories in business to be able to, and just in leadership, whether you're delivering a speech, whether you are going to be on stage, giving a talk, whether you're going to be on a podcast, whether you are, whatever it is, the media, video, you're selling something, like if your ability to tell a story is incredibly linked to your net worth these days. It's definitely a skill that I'm really passionate about trying to learn and grow in. And it's something that I'm still growing in, but will continue to pursue because it's just that important. And so kind of getting into the idea that let's go over the hook story offer framework by Russell Brunson. It's pretty simple. He essentially says we're going to do 3 things here. We are going to hook our dream customer or our audience, and then we're going to hook them, and then we're going to tell them a story, and then we're going to present them an offer. The offer is kind of the main point of the framework, and the idea is that I'm going to pitch you some kind of, or offer you, the language would suggest some kind of product, some kind of service, some kind of really a solution. to a problem. We had talked about before in the podcast this whole idea of, mattresses, and you're really selling the value behind the mattress and what it gets for you. At any rate, keeping that in mind, the hook would be like a good headline you'd see in an ad, or like the top of like a website where, this is Mr. Beast is like super good at this on YouTube. It's a like very clickbait kind of like titles, I don't know if you've seen any of that stuff, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm trying to think of one of them off the top of my head. But
last person to keep their hand on the Lamborghini the longest keeps it.
Yeah. Right. And then the thumbnail picture is like a picture of like, oh my gosh, like his face is.
It says like day 3, and then there's like a guy that's like looks like he's about to pass out, but he still has his hand on the Lamborghini.
yeah, right. And you're like, I gotta watch this. So it's like that's the hook. It really captures the attention initially, and you grab the attention of your customer, of your audience. And what I want to talk more about is the second part, the story. So obviously the offer would be how you create and present an offer in a way that someone will have to say yes. They just really want that positioning of that. And that's a great topic. The story is you basically tell them after you hook them once you grab their attention with that great thumbnail, with that awesome video, with that great headline, you want to tell them a story. And this story is going to increase the value of your offer. I could say, I'm selling you this book. Okay. Like if that was literally my sales pitch of like, hey, this is a great book I wrote.
My first question is, what's the book?
Right. But if I all of a sudden tell you a story, and I tell you my story, and then I tell you some of the things I've learned, and I end up saying like, hey, this was in this like is what I talk about in my book. All of a sudden you perceive all of this value, and you have an idea of what value you could get out of this book.
Yeah.
And then when you give the offer, you'd be way more likely to buy it. And to give this example, to drive this home, I'm going to tell a story.
As one does.
And this story actually comes from Russell's book, .com Secrets, and it's just top of mind because I was listening to this audiobook in the car today. But he basically says, hey, he gets on stage in front of a bunch of people, and he basically he gets on stage and he says, hey, I have this phone. I just bought this phone for $600. And in 10 minutes, by the time I'm done talking in 10 minutes, this is like a crowd of a bunch of like entrepreneurs and stuff to give very helpful context. And he's like at some conference, and he's like, but in 10 minutes, one of you will pay me $100,000 for this phone that I bought for this $600 phone. And then he basically said, raise your hand if you would buy this phone for $100,000 right now. No hands go up.
No.
So he says, yeah, fair enough. And then he goes on to say, he's like, let me tell you, I bought this phone blank slate and I loaded everything on manually. He says, I have looked at like hundreds and hundreds of programs, like of online courses and DVD like programs. He's like, I take the DVDs, and these programs are like sales, marketing, personal like growth and mentorship. He's like, I bought pretty much, if it existed, I bought it. And I basically took the DVD and I stripped the audio from it and made it into like an audiobook, and I put it into my Apple audiobooks or my Apple like books app, and I listened to it, and I listened to all this stuff. And I've compiled all of these things you can't even get anymore on personal development. And he's basically, I deleted all the ones that sucked, and I kept all the ones in my books app, like probably 750 different programs that are like incredibly valuable. And then he goes on to say, I have a contacts app. He says that I've networked with some of the most successful and rich and wealthy, influential people in the world. I have their contact information. I've done business with them. I'm friends with them. He's like, I could call them and ask for any favor, and we could do stuff together. He says, he's like, if you basically had this phone, you could even just have the contact and say, hey, like, I'm connected with Russell Brunson, and I have your contact, and they'd probably take your call at least. And then he goes on to say, this was like hundreds and hundreds of people. He's like, over 10 years, he's gone to conferences and networked all these people. That's how he's gotten these contacts. And then he continues the story and says, the last thing he says, I have Voxer, this audio voice app. He says, I have this program where people pay me like $100,000 to be in my inner circle, and they can send me a Voxer message anytime. They can ask any question. They can get my feedback on anything. It's like if they need help on tweaking some sales copy on one of their funnels or with any of their projects or some advice for some, directions for their company. He's like, I literally just respond and they can hit me up personally, direct line through my Voxer. So he says, you have access to a personal Voxer. And then he said the same question. He says, raise your hand if you'd pay $100,000 for this phone. No. Sorry. Then he says, we're going to do a live auction. And he does this auction and he starts at like $600 the phone value, and every hand is up in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And then he moves it up like, $1,000 and every hand's still up. And he's like, okay, let's go, $2,000 and, $3,000, $5,000 and, goes up to like $25,000, $50,000 and like a few hands are going down. He's like, gets up to like $100,000 and hands are still up. He goes up to $200,000 and he's like, he goes all the way up to like $1 million and he says, great, if your hand is still up, come on the stage. And he gets 3 guys that like hop right up on stage.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if you'd hand me $1 million right now for this, I don't know if it was $1 million, but it was a lot of money. Like I think it was 500,000 actually. Yeah. At any rate, he says, why would you give me $500,000 for this phone? He says, even just one of the contacts you have on there, I could land $1 million deal and make my whole investment back. He's like, the amount of value in things on this phone, I'd gladly spend that money right now and be confident I'd get it back. And he's like, that's an example of being able to tell a story, setting a hook. He's like, one of you will buy this phone for $100,000 in 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes of explaining all the features, one after the other, everything he had in his phone, he did this live auction. And he's literally presenting them an offer. After telling a story, he presents them an offer. And he says, this is how you increase value of your offer, by telling this story.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Cool. That's ridiculous. That's insane.
Yeah. So it's obviously like it's pretty cool and fun just to listening to the story I just told of Russell telling like this event that actually happened.
Yeah.
It's interesting, intriguing, and it proves a point, and you learn a lot. And so I'm just very I'm very passionate about the story-based communications, and I think being able to learn how to do that better obviously provides a ton of value, and people understand much more.
Yeah. So kind of with that is something that I kind of wonder is like, okay, like that the example of that story is like, okay, Russell can do that because he has so many contacts, but like, how can I, like me who doesn't necessarily have like any or many like really high value contacts or have like a ton of skills that I can offer to people? I have like a little bit, but not like a massive amount. How can I tell stories to like be able to make an offer, set a hook, tell a story, and create an offer that will bring value to people and make me money? So
be specifically within the hook story offer framework for your
like how can I use that? Because like obviously in the example of the story, Russell has a bunch of contacts, and that's kind of like the guys that got up on stage were like one contact. If I land $1 million deal, I get my investment back. It's totally worth it. So it's like, okay, well, first off, I don't have like enough. I don't have $500,000 to buy Russell's phone. But 2, like, how do I use his framework as storytelling, in order to make more money?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, like this example, I don't tell this story because I expect anybody in our audience to be like, oh yeah, I'm completely relate to everybody in that room.
Yeah.
Like not at all. The point of my stories is to emphasize a point of like within the framework, if you want to sell a product or present an offer, after you hook somebody, you got to be able to tell some kind of, it's more the story he tells of the event than it is actually just like, here's all the value I can give you. So like, if you don't feel like you have a ton of value, like that is actually part of just like creating a good offer. Like we're not going to talk about that here necessarily. That would be like different ways you could provide value and stack that in and off to make the offer really good. But like the story itself is like, I'm telling this event of Russell on stage. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm able to kind of communicate a framework and teach a framework through that story. And that's more what I want to get through is like the communication style.
Okay. So it's like, oh, I can tell a story about another guy doing this thing that's really, really cool. And people being like, oh, that's cool. Like maybe I should like read his book or something like that.
Yeah, or going into like more your question too, like say I was selling a product,
Yeah.
you know, I think this is something like I'm definitely still learning and will continue to.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, he gives the example of a guy who loses. He says, I want to sell weight loss products and I want to be able to like be a coach to people and help them lose weight.
Yeah.
He says, I wanted to be able to connect better with my audience and with my dream customers. And so he literally took 6 months and just gained a lot of weight and got really overweight because he wanted to put himself in the position of people that were overweight and had to lose the weight and to understand how not only like the process that he went through, but also like the emotions and how they're feeling, you know, the perspectives and the mindsets that are challenged on being in that situation. And he basically was able to market and tell a story about like, hey, in 6 months, I was overweight and gained all this weight. And in 6 months, another 6 months later, he was able to lose it all. And so people all of a sudden are like, I'm willing to take this offer because this guy tells a story of he's been where I am and he's conquered it and he can relate. I can trust him to walk me through this. And I perceive more likelihood of I'm going to achieve this with him.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas he didn't have that before. He literally created an experience to gain a story and build a relationship and connection with people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I don't know, maybe you're not in a health space, but like you can see he has a story to give. Or, you know, another example could be, you know, you could tell a story of when you cut lawns as a kid
Mm-hmm.
and you could dive into like the lawn care business you have, but now people can connect better to you because you're sharing a bit of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So
is it that it's like relational, or is it that like people can relate a little bit more to it because it's like, oh, you're a person and you do things and you're not just, I am robot that sells you this offer.
Right. It's definitely a combination of that, of relational connection, but also like in the example of Russell on stage, he was definitely just sharing a ton of value.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like, how can I take value or how I could help somebody or how a product could make a difference for someone?
Okay.
And how can I like basically put this into a story so people can actually visualize that this works well. But they'll know that after they hear a story about it. You know, like I lost all this weight and I'm a weight loss coach now. Oh,
well, that makes sense. Well, if you can do it, I can probably do it.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
Right. And it's like, this isn't just some random guy who's never struggled with weight before,
Yeah.
you know? So there's a lot of things at play here.
Yeah.
But the thing is like being able to do a story is just so efficient with that.
Yeah.
But also just people like I think it's something that I'm passionate about is just realizing like people really just connect to stories. Like just tell any story and you're probably going to capture and hold people's attention, especially if you're good at it, storytelling. But like part of what I'm saying too is there's so much power in the story.
Yeah.
And so using it to sell and right after you hook their attention, go right into a story, keep their attention. Yeah. That's the money.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy. So like the example of Russell is more just like the story of, hey, like I can do this thing with stories. So you can too.
Yeah.
And like we could dumb that down into like a little bit more of our life where it's like, hey, if I want to convince somebody to, you know, go do this thing, whatever, even if we're just having fun or whatnot, like, hey man, we should go sledding. And it'd be like, I don't really want to go sledding. It's cold outside. Like, I don't really have a sled. Like, I don't know where we'd even go sledding. It's like, yeah, well, I just went out with two of my buddies like kind of like a week ago, and I just kind of borrowed some sleds from my pops, from my dad, and was like, all right, we're going over to this hill and we're gonna go down. And when we got there, there's like this big part of the hill, and then there's like this little narrow part of the hill. And the narrow part of the hill is like generally what people walk up to go sled down the big part of the hill.
Like cutting through trees kind of narrow?
Yeah, cutting through trees kind of narrow. But we didn't slide down the big part. We slid down the little part with the small trees.
Hell yeah.
And then my buddy Evan was like, man, we gotta take this up a notch. So he goes on a deer trail that's going off of the smaller path, and then sleds down that. And it's even tighter. It's like you're gonna bail. I'm like telling like, oh,
You're like
get ready.
weaving between trees, kind of.
Pretty much. And I'm just like, all right, get ready. When he's going down this, get ready to call 911 because he's probably gonna break something. But then it's like, oh, the snow wasn't packed down, and we actually just made a trail that you could go through. It's really cool. But then like a herd of children showed up, like 30 kids, and we're like, oh, we don't really want to take out children.
Yeah.
So then we moved to a different hill that was even faster than that other hill, and that was a lot of fun. We also had a jump there that we went off of, and it was great. A lot of adrenaline going. Really loved going down and the shenanigans that we pulled there,
Dude.
Yeah.
That sounds
so. Want to go sledding?
Yeah, you like want to go back to that spot and do that? Be like,
Yeah.
I'd be like, dude, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So like just even telling a story, just to convince somebody of something, I think is huge because it's like, if I was just gonna be like, yeah, you want to go sledding? I'm like, no, not really. Oh, okay, well, I had a lot of fun doing it. I'm just gonna go. Like, what is that? Like,
Yeah.
But if I told the story, then you'd be like, oh, what? Don't leave without me.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like really charismatic people. I think
Mhm.
they're not gonna. I mean, they're down to earth. That's not. I'm not saying they're not, but they'll just get into stories. They'll just like you'll start chatting with them and they'll get on a story and you're like
Yeah.
sucked in. You know, like I've met people that have had the craziest experiences. Whenever I hang out with them, I'll just randomly hear stories. I'm like, what? I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
It's just like that's just like a style of communicating that's just like it just draws you in. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
just so cool.
And I think that's like just illustrating even more of the power of stories. So it's not necessarily like, oh, like I have to be able to use a story to create business and create a bunch of wealth for myself. It's just like, just try to use stories more to influence people and see what kind of influence you can kind of wield by just telling stories, and then figure out how to apply that to whatever work you are doing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's you know, I guess some kind of final thoughts, closing thoughts here. It's like I give some business examples, and you should definitely learn how to use storytelling in your business. And I think our topic is much more what's top of mind for me is, like you said, Adam, is just stories in general as a form of communication
Mm-hmm.
are just how humans work.
Yeah.
And if you want to be more charismatic, if you want to have better connection with people, if you want to be able to be the center of attention at some kind of gathering or party and be able to like hold everyone's attention and make the moment like everyone's attention, and all of a sudden you tell this engaging story and you make them all laugh, and it just makes it a better time for everybody.
Yeah.
Like that's just humans connect through story.
Yeah. I almost think like now when I'm thinking of like when I talk with people, sometimes it's like, oh, what do you do? Okay, well, I do this kind of thing. Okay, well, that's great. And then they may ask you what you do. And like the thing is what I should be doing.
Boring.
Yeah, instead of just saying, oh yeah, I do sales and I work valet. What I should be doing is like telling, just like, so you want to hear about a time where I was in Rockford, Illinois? I'll tell you what I do.
I'll tell you about Rockford. Let me tell you
Yeah.
about Rockford.
Yeah. So like you being able to use like stories, I feel like in that way, instead of being like, oh yeah, I do this, like even in everyday conversation, like just start telling a story, and then they'll probably tell their story a little bit more too.
Oh,
And I think that needs to become a little bit more natural of just like, you just need to tell your story more and tell stories more, and then you'll figure out how to use them to your advantage.
Yeah. To wrap it up, like being a dangerous man is more about just like, oh, my life is boring and I just do the hard thing all the time. There is a charismatic side to the man who's dangerous that just confident in himself and joyful and alive. He makes people laugh and he builds relationships that are meaningful, and people respect and esteem the dangerous man because he's solid, he's firm, he's funny, he's secure. And so a big channel that I'd recommend checking out if you want to dive more into these types of things is Charisma on Command. Look it up on YouTube. Phenomenal. They dissect all kinds of different social scenarios and teach kind of frameworks on how to how to be better at a lot of these things. Highly recommend them. But yeah, definitely communicate and use stories. I think one tip I could offer is just being able to get into a Word doc or notes on your phone and just think through all kinds of stories you've had from your lifetime. Think about things you've struggled with, things you've done well, accomplishments you have, sports you've played, moments. Like if you could take any topic and just be like, oh, what's one memorable thing that comes to mind? And then kind of jot that down as a little story idea. Just becoming more aware of your life allows you to like share so much more on social media, to be able to share that as content for your business, or even just to be able to like connect better with people in social environments. So that'd be kind of the hack tip that I would give, is to begin to just kind of journal out some ideas for the stories that have happened in your life.
Yeah.
So we drop new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So subscribe to the show so that you never miss out. If you found this episode valuable, definitely share it with a friend. We want to help more men become dangerous. You've been listening to the Dangerous Man Podcast. Join us next time. Until then, stay dangerous.